similar cadence in your earlier years, those who are above the age of 40. I started as a corrupt kid in a candy store in the early 2000s. We used to sell Mars bars in high school, but then used to sell CDRs, Chris's favorite bands listed here, Park, Metallica, blah, blah, blah. I then made my first few pounds, if you like, selling Xbox Live subscriptions. There's a story behind them. I figured out in the early 2000s that there was a emerging playbook, and it sort of wrote itself, and obviously e-commerce of today has replicated that exponentially, thousands and thousands of times. But before the days of like Shopify, before the days of, I don't know, Magento, all these different tools you guys have seen, we always had things like MySpace and we had Bebo, and how I sort of started making a bit of dint on the internet, and how I started making a bit of a dint on the Web 2 world was finding products on the likes of Alibaba or Window, building communities on MySpace and Bebo, creating these sort of bot networks for spamming people and adding people and creating these bulletins and whatever else. And essentially, I was honing my craft as a to drive traffic and drive intent and drive people to squeeze pages or landing pages, and essentially try to own key search words or search terms for various competitive markets. And this was how I sort of cut my teeth on the early stage of the internet. This is my career. And what I do is I basically scan the internet, find different products, find new ways to sell these products on these different social media channels, build sort of PBN networks or blog networks as they were known, and collect commissions through affiliates and wait for the inevitable terms of service shutdown from various social media networks. I actually did pretty well in college. I actually ended up making a considerable sum of money, more than our teachers that were teaching us how to do stuff on the internet, hilariously. And I got a cease and desist from our friends at Microsoft, which sits top right in my office in perpetuity, and will do probably till the day I die, because that was a 16-year-old dream basically to get noticed by Microsoft. So that's just a bit of context, a bit of a background as to what we ended up doing as kids. Shortly after that, I actually built a proper business. So I met this chap, some of you guys might know, a guy called Simon Nixon. He founded a company called Woolies Supermarket. Worked with him very closely in the infancy of Woolies Supermarket to launch their pet insurance division, which was actually one of their more competitive markets. I grew a team inside of MSM of 18 people, and ended up doing some weird, wonderful things with Simon. He actually introduced me to another chap called Paul. We did the same for McDonald's. We built a large-scale email marketing and affiliate window program for McDonald's, testing new formats on YouTube ads in the early 2000s. And then Paul, rather randomly, introduced me to some folks who sold teapots. Yeah, you guys in the web dev world will know how relatable this story is, because you just get thrown into so many mad different scenarios and just gotta digest stuff and figure out, find new ways to add value or whatever. And this is one of those, I had no business speaking to anyone about tote bars. The guy in the middle there happens to be the Duke of Westminster. I had no business speaking to him either. But the guy from McDonald's introduced me to the Duke, who happened to be very good friends with these guys who sold tote bars. So, a brief story here. Paul introduced me to these guys. This caused what I would like to say the first major inflection point in my career. And to this day, this is the least sexy thing I've ever been involved in. This one, some other stuff which are a bit more interesting. But my God, was it lucrative? We did pretty well off the back of this. So, a key sort of takeaway from this part of my life, if you like, when it was 21, 22, something like that, was how do we find new ways to sell not so sexy things? Now you can imagine, this isn't a sexy product to sell on the internet. The status quo in 2009 was this. This was the little website. This is how they sold their tote bars. You guys have seen similar, no doubt. If you wanted to buy a tote bar, you had to navigate this website. You had to download this PDF, and you had to fit it yourself if you were capable of doing so. Again, this is not going to win any awards, but we built a new website which allowed folks to actually go ahead and buy tote bars in a new way, where they get into their reg sheet, find the car, or whatever else, the expected behavior of today. I then sort of used my previous context of building PBNs, and building blog networks, and building search dominance to buy every single domain derivative of carbrand-towbars.com.co.uk, blah, blah, blah. And basically just completely flatlined the market on everything to do with tow bars. I still to this day do not own a tow bar. I made a shitload of cash out of tow bars, which is quite ridiculous, and they don't even know what a tow bar actually does. But I know an awful lot about how you sell them on the internet. Again, this isn't something I'm super proud of, but it's just the early days, how you make money on the internet when you're 21, 22, but no idea what you do. So we took our learnings from running a supermarket, McDonald's, dominated search across, I think it's 60 or 70 different domains you can see on screen there. We created basically 100 different websites which look similar to it. We just completely owned the tow bar market. And then it was 2014, I was tired. I was building a business that was printing money. Isn't that great? But I was burnt out, to be frank. So I sold the whole thing to a bunch of German dudes for a lot more than we anticipated. Traveled for a few years, met some kangaroos, bought a house, bought a boat, bought a houseboat, spent some money, came back to the UK, I was broke, and had to start all over again. And this is the sort of tip of the story, I guess, an entrepreneurial web dev person, which I guess this is why me and Chris became friends, because he's in a very similar seat to myself. So this leads me on to coming back to the UK and figuring out what do I actually want to do next, what's actually important to me, what are the main requirements for me to get involved. These are some key takeaways, which I'm sure most of you have actually got in your back pocket as well, but for me, at that point, I was like, if I'm going to work with anyone, they've got to have some money, like real money, not just take me for a ride. They've got to actually enable my network to expand in some meaningful way. They've got to make me smile. It's got to be like candid or funny or whatever. And it's got to unlock a good story. Because I've learned that good stories sell way more than good code. Sorry, Chris. But they just do. So So we ended up working with a company called Tokyo Digital, which is where I met Chris. We ended up working with very astute organizations such as members clubs. I don't know if you guys are, any of you lucky enough to have frequented Annabelle's in your life. It's a ridiculous place. So we did all of the members clubs there. We did all of the infrastructure of Annabelle's. We did a lot with the Vodka collection, again, super boutique lux hotels. And here we've got a wedding on this Christmas, turbulent times.
Yeah, I don't really want to relive those moments. To give you some context around Annabelle's, they're owned by the same group that owns the Ivy and Sexy Fish and a bunch of other like ultra high-end entities.
Yeah, we ended up getting roped in by someone I'll never forget, which I still to this day dub Angry Jeff, aka John Rule. So John Rule hit up me and Garrett, I don't know when this was 2016, 17, something like that. And he was like, I want to sell a shitload of tickets. I want to sell just everything. I want to make this craziest website you've ever seen. I want to, just blow this and blah, blah, blah. We came up with this whole strategy for the Fyre Festival. We did our bit. We got paid a little bit. Most people didn't get paid anything. And we ended up doing some pretty cool stuff for the Fyre Festival. Which had its obvious merits and benefits and whatnot. But yeah, we didn't quite get the high ticket we were promised.
The scale on that website was ridiculous. It was something like 12 million uniques in the space of 3 hours. It was one of the most high-scale projects. A ridiculously high-scale project. It was about 12 million uniques in the first 3 or 4 hours. It's one of the most high-scale projects I've ever done, and I built SeanTheSheep.com.
And I built SeanTheSheep.com. Would you? It's a mic drop, it's not a name drop. Yeah. Right, so we then went on to work with the Prince of Dubai on his little side project, which was the Deep Dive Dubai project. So hilariously, he always got the idea to build the world's biggest dive center in the middle of the desert, which obviously has never been done before. So again, as you can imagine, he roped us into all the tech infrastructure, all the web dev, all of the check-in, all of the blah, blah, blah. This tank, I think it's 70 meters deep, so it's pretty deep for those who like to dive. It filled it up, I think, 3 times, because every one of those times it filled it up, it dissipated into the sand and it leaked. So all of that precious water that they collected from God knows where in the Gulf, they lost in the sand and had to go find some more. So that was quite a turbulent project. But me and Garrett sort of waded through that together and finding ways to solve these novel problems. Obviously, we didn't solve the water problem, but all the things.
The thing that was nuts about that was it was actually 7 different tech partners, and I don't know if anybody's done kind of Middle Eastern projects, but none of us were allowed to talk to each other prior to actually starting work. So everything got specced out independently, and then it was all supposed to come together, and nothing joined up. We were supposed to track divers in the tank, but they put an analog CCTV system in, and just crazy stuff like that.
You should talk about that actually, how you solved that problem. I think that's quite interesting.
Well, the first problem we had was the whole thing was spec on RFID wristbands, so it was like you were tracked throughout, like the magic bands at Disney, and no one thought that RFID doesn't actually work underwater. So then the second solution, which I came up with, we'll do blinking LEDs, different colours, and we'll know which diver's in the tank when the colour was blinking. Then I found out it was a closed circuit television system, and we couldn't even get a digital feed, so that all just went away as a requirement.
So we were basically tasked by the Prince of Dubai to find a novel way to record people through these different episodes and different tanks, and then give them an MP4 at the end, which sort of captivated their die, give them a scorecard and whatever else. But in order to do so, we needed to know who this guy was versus that guy versus that guy. So we tried to find another way to solve the problem, which is what Gareth's talking about. Then we went on to work with Harrods on the world's first store app, where you can sort of navigate different floors in a geospatial way, which is quite an interesting problem to solve.
That was a headache as well.
They're all headaches in their different ways. Yeah, and then I randomly got introduced to another royal and ended up designing a teapot for the Queen. You know, it just goes like so strange, this part of the story. So skipping on a little bit. Teapots for the Queen, watches for Bell staff. I've just been involved in some different projects where it's like, can you add anything to this? Yes, you can. Or get involved. We need to do this in 2 weeks. You guys know how it is. Let's skip on a little bit. This was the in-store activation I did for Bell staff. Drury in Shenzhen. Okay, so, and to introduce modern English, which is where I'm at right now. So, modern English, for those who don't know, is a little company in Manchester. We're actually sort of remote, fully distro, predominantly serve the music industry. I've been there about 6 or 7 years now. I'm now like one of the members of the board, managing partner, head of innovation. But prior to my involvement, they had already achieved like 10 or 12 years, from memory, 10 or 11 years in the music industry. Someone reached out to me at the cost of COVID, because obviously the music industry just flatlined and they had no trade whatsoever. And they were basically asking for my experience and how they could diversify their offering and find new ways of getting with meaningful gigs, because that's essentially something I've always managed to do. Hence, working with the Queen and working with the Prince and blah, blah, blah. So we ended up starting a completely new division where we did like STEM learning apps for the likes of Discovery Channel and Verizon. This is me stood outside somewhere in Manchester testing said app. This is like a multi-episodic AR experience that you can sort of transcend different worlds and learn how to do different, experiences and model. We also then moved into the NFT space. You guys, I'm sure some of you would spend some of your hard-earned cash on NFTs. I never did spend any cash on NFTs, thankfully. But I was lucky enough to work with some folks who did some pretty interesting projects. And this project was a project where you could essentially modulate your own sneaker. And once you then arrived at a sneaker that you like to look up, you could sort of cast that in stone and submit that on chain and get your own NFT equivalent of that sneaker. And then top right, you can see there was this voting grid where fans of different sneakers could say, I really like that sneaker, or that one's way better, or whatever it might be. We ended up having 1 million people actually contribute sneakers to this, and it did pretty well. So that was quite a good project to be involved in. We then did the same for our friends at Puma. We did a couple more things for Puma. So you guys who are Man City fans, dare I say, might have seen this in the wild. So this is something that I came up with for the team at Puma. You can actually prompt via an AI input your perfect kit into existence. You can get an image back from a text image model. You then be able to cast that image onto a 3D model, and you then be able to sort of, again, modulate how the actual design of that shit might look. We were lucky enough to meet some of the players and do some sort of B-roll stuff with those guys. And I think the winning kit is probably the least inspired kit you can ever imagine. It's like this one here. It's basically a I don't know, a gold bit. Yeah, so they decided to pick that one, and that will be on the actual goalie strip later this year. Ridiculous. I'm just getting 600,000 submissions. Some pretty cool ideas. You go for the green gold net. You know how it goes. So, can I skip this? No, I don't know how to use computers. Try again. Skip again. Oh yes, no, of course yes. Hold on. Here we go. We're back. We're back. Cool. So this is a cool project that me and Garrett worked on. So some of you guys might be familiar with the band at U2. One or two of you, I hope. Our good friend, The Edge, aka Dave, as we know him, actually reached out to a friend of mine, and they had this novel problem where they had this really lofty idea. They wanted to basically take over the public address system of Nevada in true U2 fashion. You know, why not? Is he ridiculous even counting this? They wanted to take over the public address system, the same system that you would use to alert people of fire, or a bomb scare, or something of that nature. You know, Bono was like, we need that PA, we need to do something with that. I want to make this baby talk on the sphere across thousands of speakers at the same time. And obviously, the state of Nevada weren't into that idea. So they came to us, and within a week, they were like, can you solve this problem for us? So me and Garrett teamed up to solve that problem, and he came up with a very novel and a very intelligent way of solving that problem. The way of basically creating a broadcasting streamed web application that can sync to the exosphere in Vegas. Go ahead.
It was pretty crude. You guys were going down the web radio approach and stuff like that. Because latency was a concern, all we did was preemptively download the entire MP3 into the client, and then we could trigger it on a socket in time with the Swedish level, and it was really crude, so no latency whatsoever. Really simple.
It was good. We sweated a lot of pain trying to figure out how to figure out the diff and the latency and whatnot. And Garrett was like, oh, we can do that with sockets, so it'll take 5 minutes. Cool. There you go. So, yeah, we delivered that for the Sphere. We've now got a really good relationship with the Sphere in Vegas. I think Garrett is still the first and only person in the world who's connected a web app to the actual rack system that powers the Sphere globally. So that's one claim to fame I'll give you.
I'm here for orders.
It wasn't a very unique problem to solve. He could help you. I'm not sure it was much usable there. After working with the Sphere, we're very lucky to work with folks at Google. We ended up working with Google on some pretty novel projects for them in their Google Maps team. This is, again, more one malicious work here. So I've found new ways to recontextualize modern English's offering and try and bring just novel ways to, bring new work through the door, essentially. Because traditionally, we would just do an artist website, e-com website for artists or whatever. And I was like, can we make other websites? Can we make experiential things? Can we make things that happen to be somewhat immersive? Or can we, dare I say, break the internet or hack the format some way? So we worked with Google quite closely to develop this sort of maps takeover, where during Elton's final shows in 2022, fans of Elton John could see this version of the map. They get to navigate LA in some way, and they could collect these little varsity jacket patches, if you like, as they visited these places in the physical domain. And those who were lucky enough to collect all patches, because they've nothing better to do, were invited to potentially meet Elton John at pre-show. We ended up doing the same for Oasis last year, which was pretty successful. Only 17,000 people use this in the first week. And now, I think we're coming to a close. Where are we at? We've reached. Cool. We're coming to a close. So now what I'm in the midst of doing is, with Motto, we're in the process of like amalgamating all this experience and all these different ideas, trying to reframe the offering to the market, trying to create what we're doing the next wave of fan engagement. So we're building out a suite of services to better serve the music industry, and specifically the side of the music industry that's actually got some money, which is the legacy and the catalog artists, whereas the young blood, up-and-coming artists have got no money whatsoever, which led us to working with KISS. So, let's just go back to that. I mean, love it. So, for those who don't know, KISS Paul and Gene are not close friends of mine, but someone I've actually spoken to, which is crazy to say. I'm into this type of music, not like pop rock, hair metal, but you know, similar genre. So working with kids has been pretty transformational for me personally. We're came up with this concept where we can create this, I think you're done to this actually, the yield enhancement toolkit. So how do we take various inputs?
That term means something quite different.
Yeah.
We'll
get into that. So how do we take various inputs? How do we take these various inputs on the left-hand side here, such as your listening behavior, anything you might follow on YouTube, anything you might purchase from different e-providers, and how do we add all of those triggers and those metrics in a rich sort of first-party database to then create these personalized experiences at scale? So certain ads that are being retargeted, certain tiered content that you might be access to, certain things you might not be forced to listen to, etc. And we ended up creating this fan platform for this. So the fan platform now essentially enables you to do a few things. You'll notice a few similar techniques from other projects. But you can actually go ahead and build what we're calling like a battle jacket inside of the KISS arm. So in KISS arm, you can build patches, you can append them to your jacket, like stitch them to your jacket in some novel way after you've unlocked them. And then obviously on the back end, the team at Clubhouse, which is a company that bought the rights to KISS, can see and track essentially how many fans are actually going through this whole process and how valuable the asset, which is the catalogue of the music, is actually probably in real time. So this is the next wave of modern English and what we're looking to do. And I just wanted to share that with you as a bit of a brief work in progress so you can see what we're up to right now.
This is actually really interesting, almost going back to the beginning of the presentation, because this is really reminiscent of that early Web 2.0 mashup era, where you could pull in a load of APIs, do really interesting stuff with them, and everything's very permissive. And Spotify is probably one of the last major services out there that's got a permissive API for doing that kind of stuff with. But I know you guys have seen some changes with that recently, haven't you?
Yeah, so I don't know what's going on with Spotify. I don't know if there's anyone who's ever dealt with the Spotify API. Anyone? Raise your hand. One person. Amen. Anyone? Just one. Okay, well, I'll talk to you. You've got some context. So for those of you who knows.
By the way, the company I work for, we've got like a stake in Pop House as well.
Oh my God. Okay. Who do you work for?
Podex. It's part of Talbot.
I know what that is. Yeah. Okay, what the conversation? You didn't see this. So, yeah, what's interesting? So, small world, Macclesfield. It's going to be the big.
It's the new Silicon Valley.
The new Silicon Valley. The new Silicon Valley. We need to get that on the tweet. The new Silicon Valley. Now, all right, we'll go through it. So, I'm going to talk to this guy. So, yeah, Spotify, for those who don't know, is an app that you can play music, whatever. But on the back end, you can actually aggregate tons and tons of data. Up until the middle of last year, it sort of nuked half of the scopes. You can't do half as much as you could 10 years ago. And now, for whatever reason, it's sort of making these API terminals like rocking or shit in terms of accessibility. You just can't get hold of one anymore. So we're probably looking to work with like the Clubhouse and UOG and Sony and whatnot, because they've got some sort of backdoor handshake with our friends at Spotify, and we can still do these novel activations. But again, I think it's a dying industry, the Spotify thing, but Garrett's got a different take on it. Maybe they're looking to monetize it, I have no idea.
Well, I think it depends who you're working with. If you're working with one of the major labels who have a stake in Spotify, you can get pretty much whatever you want, but they are certainly restricting it. Outside of the user permissions, they've actually taken all genre and tag data off the API now, but that's because they're concerned about people using it to train AI models. So I think that's very, I mean, you've seen it on Reddit as well, there's a massive shift in terms of permissive API.
For those who don't know like how big of an impact AI is on music, typically on an average day, there was 70 to 80,000 songs being uploaded to Spotify every single day, which is insane to comprehend how much content that is. Now, 1/3 of that content is AI generated. So the music we listen to transiently lo-fi, trip hop, hip hop, all the one stuff that isn't too vocal centric is often just generated. People are obviously trying to crack down on that. And the
music industry's got collective licensing, unionisation, and all sorts of copyright laws in their favour. Developers, on the other hand, are just giving code up to these models, and as is wiping everything there. So the music industry is probably going to fare better.
Yeah, that's it. Well, I don't know. I think I've raced through that, so apologies if you guys are starting yawning or... We've got about 5 minutes left. If anyone's got any questions, I can throw them over around or not. I can pause there. And we can say our goodbyes. And we can go get a beer. Let me know what you want to do. I'm going to ask him if he's got any questions, because he's the only guy using this Spotify.
Do you want to paste
My API is do as
Yeah.
what I've learned is do as little with it as possible.
Cool.
So worth mentioning anything about Popeyes? So Popeyes is actually really interesting in the record industry because they are signaling a shift. Popeyes is founded by Pearson Dean, who did the original deal with Spotify on behalf of Sony Music. It was the first major label license deal in Spotify. It's the reason Spotify was able to exist at the time. But Popeyes is effectively a fund. Billion? $2.2 billion fund, effectively like a private equity fund. And this is taken off in the record industry now. These huge funds that come and buy song rights that the record industry, in terms of labels and publishers conventionally, had overlooked. And it's the reason we're both quite excited about working in music again, because traditionally music clients were really hard, they were low budget, but with massive data problems. And now all of a sudden there's this influx of money coming in that actually understands that the data is worth investing in, and that's where you're, it's not your enhancement, that's my term for somebody else, but it's the appreciation engine or whatever. That's where that's kind of finding a new lease of life.
It's essentially taking inspiration from years in e-commerce. Those who work in e-commerce will understand what the CDP is, right? A customer data platform. How you normalize data into some sort of user profile. It's basically stealing that concept and now repurposing it for the music industry, which to them is like, double dutch. They don't even understand it's impossible. But yeah, to Gareth's point, we're recognizing now that these music funds are popping up and they're raising billions of dollars of available funds to go and buy music, because music is now being recognized as an asset class, because it's appreciated. It's almost predictable as to how
it's pension backable now. The SEC has actually defined music as an asset class as pension backable. So there's a huge amount of funds coming in.
Yeah. So I've already got much more to say. My throat's a bit dry. So yeah, that's my story. If you guys enjoyed it, it was too warm. You've got a question? Here you go.
Would you mind if I took the mic? You take the mic. Me and my friend here, Matt, we run the record label for a little while in Manchester, and we've been involved in music for a bit, and we're also heavily involved in the tech industry now. We've kind of pivoted, and what we've found is that just to give some context to what was being described here, record labels now, what they do, instead of doing A&R, so classically it's called A&R, artist repertoire, which means you develop the bands and make them better and make them more palatable to the market. What happens now is they actually just look at the back catalogue of music and they try to buy royalties and they sell that instead. And that is highly profitable. So I'm not saying it's bad, because, like, I'm sure all of you here, you love all the music, and I implore anybody to go back and look at all the music, which is fantastic and enjoyable. But what it's done to the emerging bands is completely crushed the market, because you've got a market which is oversaturated. When you talk about it in terms of economics, it's about supply and demand. So the market's oversupplied. Like you guys said, 80,000 new songs a day, which nobody could ever possibly listen to. And as we all know, I think looking around, you're all similar-ish to me, there were subcultures which existed, and bands would emerge and generate subcultures, and it was a very exciting thing. It doesn't really happen now. I've not really got a point to make in that particular regard. I'll leave that there. I've got the passion there. Yeah. But the thing that is making money is to buy old catalogues and resell. And that was my only point I was going to make.
Tagging. You're dead right. Now, this is something we recognised a couple of years ago. Like, people are investing stupid money in catalogues. Like, stupid. Let me show you this. So, this next slide is kind of ridiculous and hilarious. Although,
Just to your point, the difference between the funds versus the record labels is the funds get very excited about a 2% increase in yield enhancement. If If you went to a traditional publisher and said we can increase your deal by 2%, yeah, they're not interested in the effort. Funds get really excited because 2% yield enhancement year on year puts 10-20% on the value of the actual catalogue. So when they come to resell it, it's done its job.
Yeah. So I just wanted to close out on something which is super important to me. Check it out. So we work with a company called ILP to volumetrically scan the members of KISS and turn them into avatars. So I don't know if you're familiar with the Apple Voyage show, Little Seagull. It's insane. If you've not seen it, I really like Apple. You need to watch it. It's insane. How technically capable the show is insane. So the guys that framed Apple Voyage have now done the same with our friends in KISS, and they've turned them into these 3D characters that control the world in perpetuity, even though half of them are dead now. And this is how they are perceiving the next wave of these catalog acquisitions. They spent $400 million buying the music. They spent $200 million building out the IP. The value in fund, supposedly, or value in catalog, supposedly, is north of $700 million at this point in time. It's kind of crazy how people from Cheshire, little old me and Gary, and then get the hell of working with these folks who just have this power to buy and deploy this capital at this scale. It's just insane. So I just wanted to share that with you because that's something I'm really proud of as a piece of work. But as a big fan of KISS, this is like one of those childhood dreams sort of things. So here we are, onwards and upwards. We're in the business of working with Avicii and Maiden and Metallica and Lockdown and similar things, but I wanted to share that story with you today. Make sure you've got to be aware of this thing because it's ridiculous in every possible way. So it's all from me.
When are you doing Joy Division?
Yeah. If someone buys it, is this something you'd like to buy? No, I have no idea. If it's up for sale, we'll probably know the person who's going to buy it, and there's a strong chance of turning it to some ridiculous 3D characters. Right, cool. That's it. I need a drink. Thank you.